You go back 10, 20 years in China, you had so much of growth coming purely from just more people showing up each year. Right. That labor contribution rather than capital or productivity. Now you need the productivity.
Then they tried the capital investment, right?
Well, the key thing on that, though, is on making sure the capital is channeled in the way that then boosts productivity.
Yeah.
And that, I think, has been the bigger challenge in the more recent years, to be fair, in China, but also around many parts of the world. Everyone has been suffering from this for more than a decade. The extra challenge China has, though, unlike, say, even somewhere that has a smaller population, is about numbers. You could maybe open up and have some more people coming in, even with the language challenges, but it would not really move the dial on what we're talking about here when you look at a population of around 1.4 billion people. Even if the working age group is shrinking, there's just not enough people out there to be able to practically make that happen. It just doesn't make sense. So even in Japan, possible maybe, but I think in China it's much, much harder to actually do. So that you're right, the pressure on the productivity and the productive investment, that's the key part here we need to look at, and how strong we see the growth in the private sector to be able to bring in those innovations and introduce them in a way that does keep growth a bit stronger without needing to resort to, for example, residential real estate investment, which is not as productive.
Is enough being done then to really rise to these challenges that we've been talking about? And it just seems to be rank complacency. And if you take Japan as an example, is the BOJ in tinkering with yield control, yield curve control, a sideshow to the main challenge, which is structural reform? Or is that a necessary part of the normalization process?
Well, for sure, you need to find a way of normalizing the market. If the BOJ owns more than half of all outstanding JGBs, it does need to get away from that game of owning so many, and even if ultimately reduce its share so the market can function much more easily. But that's absolutely right. The bigger challenge is indeed on finding the productivity gains there as well, and inducing the right sort of environment where that can happen. And I think we have seen some reforms, but there is certainly room for that sort of thing to happen in many places. Interestingly, when you look and contrast in the West, the big change that we've been seeing has been this extra amount of government support for example, green and particularly for technology-related industries. And that combined can cause that productivity boom. The challenge in those areas, particularly on the ESG space, has been on getting the right incentives in place to get a critical mass. Exactly. But it looks like with the amount of resources now being thrown at it, we should be seeing that.